Hi, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and this is my week of reading wrap-up where I talk about the books that I read last week, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. So I had a really good week. I have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right in. So this first book has been on a lot of best of lists, and it even made the Book of the Month Club Best of the Year finalist round. But it didn't resonate in the same way with me. I think it was a good book as a debut, but I don't think that it worked as well as it could have had it been better edited. Let's talk about it. The book is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. Now, I think you all know that a book doesn't have to be perfect for me to really love it. I can see through flaws. I can admire where it was going, what it was trying to do. And more importantly, the things that I love about it could make me love it so much that the other things feel like nits. But in this case, I do feel like the story just went in too many different directions. At this core is the story of Eleanor and her family. She has 2 adult children and her husband has passed away. We open with Benny, who lives in the East Coast. She's being called home because her mother has just died. This is traumatic for her because she has been distanced from her family for a good while. Because she feels disrespected and not seen and understood and known and rejected by them. She has a brother, Byron, and Byron has stayed in California with the mother and the father and has seen through the father's death and then now the mother's death. The mother was sick for a while, but no one called Benny because of this rift. So Benny has been pulled home because the mother made contingent in her will that the children needed to sit down together and listen to a recording that she made. And is this recording that then takes us back into her childhood and her life in the Caribbean. And what then precipitated her leaving the Caribbean and starting a new life in England, and then brought her to the United States. I think the family dynamics were interesting. I think the history was interesting. I really liked the main character, Eleanor, and her struggles and how she persevered. There were auxiliary characters that were brought in later that I didn't think were necessary to progress this storyline. And ultimately, I didn't believe in the rift. I didn't believe in, and I didn't understand why the rift would be so monumental. And so that made, if that is one of the key things in this story, it made it very difficult for me to buy into the rest of it. This is as I think I made mention, this is her debut novel. She's written more short stories before. And so just for me, this was a little too spread out, a little too wild, but the writing's beautiful. I like what she was trying to do. I just didn't, it didn't wow me. So I'll continue to follow her and see what she does next. Then, one of the things that I'm going to be doing this year with Leo from Leo's Little Book Life, he is my continuous buddy reading partner, is we want to read more Henry James. And I said I think it was last week, that I said that I read Washington Square by Hanya Yanagihara. And I knew as I was saying it that was not right. It was To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara that made us want to read Washington Square. So Washington Square in Hanya Yanagihara's book is the center place that 3 different stories and timelines all kind of anchor to, which then made us wonder why Washington Square. What was it about that and that allusion to Henry James? And so we read that book and we realized that we wanted to read more Henry James. So we started this year. We picked up a kind of novella and this is Daisy Miller. It's found here. Now, I will say this didn't arrive in time for me to read it out of here. I did read it from my library, and it had a foreword by Elizabeth Hardwick. And I'm here to tell you, if you get a chance to read Daisy Miller with that introduction, do that. That was phenomenal, and a really great introduction to Elizabeth Hardwick, who I wanted to read a little bit more of, but I haven't had a chance to. So highly recommend that. This is wild. This took me in so many different directions. I will admit that at first I thought I might dump it. It's really short. It's a very short read. The things that annoyed me at up to the halfway mark became much more interesting and in essence, contextualized in the second half. This was originally serialized in a magazine in 1878, and it's set in Europe, but it's set in a very interesting Europe. It's set in an enclave of Americans in Europe, a mix of the old money and nouveau riche. And it's through the lens of these Americans living and traveling through Europe that we look at Daisy Miller. And Daisy Miller is this innocent, naive, young woman who is traveling Europe for the first time with a mother that's out of her element and a young brother, very young, who is just a spoiled brat and can't be controlled. And what we see is the tension in this is really about propriety. It's really about what is Daisy Miller allowed to do? What is she being naive? Is she being manipulative? Is she authentic? It's all these questions as people are watching this young woman. Our main character is Mr. Winterbourne, and Mr. Winterbourne is an American who's been living in Geneva, and he is wealthy. He comes from wealth. He's visiting his aunt in the Lake District or the Lake area. I think I think we're in Switzerland when it opens. And he's enjoying a lovely tea outside overlooking the lake, and comes across this little bratty boy who's an American as well. And then strolls in his beautiful sister, and that creates an entree for a conversation. And, he's kind of charmed. Winterbourne is kind of charmed by her because he hasn't seen anyone like her. Everybody else they're so fixed in propriety and what's allowed to be done and what's allowed to be said that she's kind of a breath of fresh air. It's also very clear from how she speaks and what she says that she's not as well educated and hasn't been brought up in the manner with which the people that he spends time with have been. And he's there to visit his older aunt, and his aunt is absolutely dismissive of these people. They're not the right sort, and tries to avoid them at all costs. He's charmed by her. And so we see her through his eyes. Then they separate and go to Rome. And our main character, Winterbourne, comes to Rome to see a friend and also really to see her again. And it's there that she has taken up with some man and is scandalizing everyone. This was apparently a sensation when it was first written. And I can see why, because at first what becomes annoying, and you start to think about this character of Daisy Miller as this, young, wild, like, does she not know any better? She's going to get herself in trouble. She's doing things that are not to be done, not seen, not appropriate. But you start to question, well, why? And she really has this young enthusiasm and excitement for the world. And you start to question, well, why is she being hemmed in? And now, of course, we can see that very, very clearly. And what's amazing to me is, and maybe not so amazing, is how clearly that was also read in the Times. And so this is why this became such a big, big deal when it was first written. This was fantastic to read with Leo. And it was one of those that through our conversations about it, my admiration of this kind of novella grew and grew and grew. Just talking through some of these things. And Henry James is a great author because he doesn't lay it out for you. He keeps it open. So you can make the determination. You are the one that's in control of this. And so he doesn't put his thumb on the scales of where he's directing you. You're not a puppet reading this. And I respect and appreciate that. It's one of the things I like most about Henry James. So yeah, this was unbelievably good. If you haven't had a chance to read it, find yourself the edition that has the Elizabeth Hardwick as the opener to it. Yeah, so that was great. Next up, this was gifted to me by St. Martin's Press via NetGalley. This is The Villa. So you all know that I have a love for Italy and also France. And so I try to read a lot of things set there, if not in translation and all of that. This looked like a lighter fare. So similarly to how I read the Paris Apartment, this also fit that same bill, this kind of thrillery, mystery, suspenseful story set in a place that I'm interested in. Right. This is by Rachel Hawkins. And, she's trying to do a lot here. I don't know that it was 100% successful. Actually, it wasn't 100% successful for me. I liked it okay. This is really escapist fun. We've got two timelines, actually a 2.5 timeline. I'll talk about that in a second. We have one timeline that's current day, and we have two authors that have been friends since they were in school from Asheville, North Carolina. One has become a cozy mystery writer, and her writing success led the other to start her own writing career as kind of a self-help, girl, you better, blah, 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 fill in the blank kind of self-helpy guru. A lot of slogans, a lot of mottos, kind of thoughtless drivel, but is making her a ton of money and getting her all the limelight, all of the press, all of that. Whereas the cozy mystery writer, Emile, feels like she's really been left behind. And Ches is kind of like this vibrant, wealthy, kind of take the bull by the horns. And she has come up with this plan that she was going to go to this villa in Italy to write and kind of use it as a writing retreat for 6 weeks. She knows that Emily is kind of going through some things. And so she asks Emily to come with her. Like, let's just do a reset and kind of get a getaway. And I work best when you're near me because I get inspired by your writing and we could do this together. It convinces her to go. And their relationship has been a little fraught as of late with her meteoric rise and Emily's, what she feels is stagnating life. So they go to this villa, and this villa is actually very famous for a murder that happened there decades earlier. That leads us into the other timeline. The murder happened in the early 70s, and it was the place where there was a debauch vacation going with some rock stars. And the other two women that are of that timeline are Mari and Laura. They are stepsisters who have fallen into the orb of this young singer-songwriter. And that singer-songwriter is somebody who was connected to their father/stepfather. and ran away from his wife with Mari and started a life with her. And also has found himself kind of introducing Laura into the family. And so it's Bohemia, it's like late 60s, early 70s, drugs, sex, rock and roll, freedom, sexual revolution, all of this happening at the same time. So that's fine. What things started to go off the rails when there's also kind of like this, it's so weird. It's like a mirroring of Mary Wollstonecraft and who wrote Frankenstein and who married Percy Shelley. So Pierce is the name of the singer-songwriter, and he has that kind of same bohemian, wild, debauch personality as Percy Shelley had. And so that, and then you have like Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, and all of her, she was a great feminist writer. And then the father was kind of like this bohemian, original OG bohemian philosopher. So it's almost like a reflective playing with that concept, where if you know about it, you're like, oh, I get it. But if you don't know about it, it doesn't really change the storyline. But when I said 2.5, there's also this like introduction of this weird podcast, but it's only for a short moment in time. And it's people talking about the true crime that happened in this place. So, it's fun. It's a fun escapist beach read romp, my kind of beach read. But the plot holes are gigantic. It kept me going, but it's just a lot. It's a lot of odd threads that didn't really need to be there. But if you like these kind of multiple timelines, kind of thrillery, suspenseful mysteries, you might enjoy this. How about I put it that way? Then I read a book, also a NetGalley. I'm trying to get through some of my NetGalley books. This is from a Europa edition, and this is All the Lovers in the Night. This is by Mieko Kawakami and Sam Bett as the translator. So I wanted to read something for January in Japan, where it's a month-long challenge where people read something from Japan, a Japanese author, in the month of January. And then this also happened to be in my NetGalley queue. So this is from Europa. Thank you very much for Europa Editions for granting me access. So this is the third Mieko Kawakami book that I've read, and I don't think she's an author for me. I did read Heaven, and I liked that more than I think I got on with this one. So I'm not sure if I think I don't like something about her style. And it's that she gets very, very microscopically close to the subject. And it's hard to pull back out, to pan out, and to contextualize the subject matter. So if you don't really like the subject matter, or if you're not interested in this character, the journey you go on is not going to be a fulfilling one for you. In this case, we are following Fuyuko, and Fuyuko is a copy editor who has just been very, very sheltered. She has only interest in working and very minimal things outside of that. She's very blank slate, even though she's in her 30s. And I think I'm just a little bit over these blank slate female characters that have been kind of reduced because of trauma that that happened earlier to them, so that they are reapproaching the world with like this childlike lack of understanding and naivete that I don't buy. Number one, not to say that trauma doesn't affect people in ways that could be this way, but I think I'm sick of the trope at this stage of reading so many of them. And in this case, she is trying out new things because she was working at this company, and she gets contacted by someone who left the company, started her own company, and is asking her to do some freelance work on the side. And they start to develop a quasi-friendship, kind of a mentor-mentee type of relationship. And it's all fine, but but our character takes it way, way, way too far and doesn't have this sense of common sense of what to do, and also meets this man who she's interested in, but can't register it as such. And so she starts to show up where this man is on a regular basis, and have conversations with him. And he kind of teaches her about physics. And they have talks about light. And I just found the metaphor to be overused, like taking her from darkness into light, like, turning on the light to certain ideas and concepts about herself and self-reflection and reflection. You get where I'm going. It just was, I think, the glacial pace. And then there's this writing tick that she does where Fuyuka would repeat back what the person said. So the person would say a sentence and then she would repeat it back. And it went over and over and over and over. It just was endless. And it was mind numbing. And then I think there was also this endless sense of not knowing something, identifying it as new information and then processing it, and seeing that happen all over and over. It was too much for me. I decided that I think she's not my cup of tea. I think I'm going to sever my relationship with trying her out ever again. So, I can see that she's a good writer. Just her style of writing and her choice of what she chooses to write about just doesn't work for me. But let me tell you something that did work for me, because this worked on a massive scale. This is Indelicacy by Amina Cain. And this was so good. This is polar opposite. And I think it made me harsh, probably more harsh about the Mieko Kawakami book than I otherwise would have been if I didn't have something so strong to do a comparison against. In this book, we have a woman who is so present. She is so herself. We don't even know her name until near the end of the book. We meet her and she's writing about her marriage and she's writing about recent changes in her life. We're not going all the way back in her history, but we're going back a few years where she went from being a cleaner at a museum and being obsessed and in love with the paintings and not loving the job of being a cleaner, but loving the act of being in front of these paintings and trying to deconstruct and understand the stories that were being told to her, and then going home and writing that out. And this was a process that she loved and she got deep satisfaction from. She also develops a friendship with a woman who is also a cleaner, but who doesn't have the same interest or connection to the art. And that woman wants maybe more traditional things. Like she wants to be in love, fall in love with a beautiful, wealthy man. And she wants to have certain things. She ends up getting married herself. She ends up getting married to a man who's very wealthy, very rich. He's an older man. And all of a sudden she's projected into this new world. And all the time, this woman still knows herself. It's not that she loses herself in this new environment, in this new world. She adapts to the circumstances at play, but she's always herself. She continues to write, and she continues to go to art museums, and she continues to follow her own passion. She just is doing it in different circumstances. And I absolutely loved and I was like, oh, why does this feel so fresh? Why does this feel so new? Why is a woman who truly understands herself and knows what motivates her feel shocking and feels revelatory? I would love to know, have you read any books where a woman is fully in possession of her self-awareness and her knowledge, and she doesn't change so much as the circumstances around her? I would love to know. And someone who is not the villain. Someone who is not the bad person in the book. where we center women's desire and women's control, self-control, self-awareness in a story. I would love to know if you have any suggestions of any books that this makes you think of. So yeah, this was a great book. I loved this book. I loved reading it. I've seen this on some people's end of year best of, and it was fantastic. All right, so let's talk about the books that I'm currently reading. This next one I just finished. I breezed through it yesterday. I just couldn't put it down. And I can't tell you too much about it because I'm reading it with a book group that we're doing a group read. This is Olivia Manning's Fortunes of War saga. This is the Levant Trilogy by Olivia Manning. I will talk much more about this next week. Then I'm continuing on with Emile Zola's The Fortune of the Rougons. This is a translation by Brian Nelson. I'm reading this slowly because there's a lot of contextual things that I don't yet understand about this time in French history. And so I'm trying to ground myself a little bit, but enjoying his writing is just phenomenal. Started a new book. This is Vernon Subutex. This is the first volume of a trilogy, and this is by Virginie Despentes, and it is translated from the French by Frank Wynne. This is a wild ride. So many punk references, like literal references that I have a deep connection with that I've never expected to read in French literature, let alone any literature, to be quite frank. So that is quite exciting. Just started it. You'll hear more about this next week. Then I started this chunkster. This has been calling me. This is Orhan Pamuk's Nights of Plague, and this is translated from the Turkish by Ekin Oklop. So far, so good. I've only one chapter in, but really excited to jump into something really chunky to get something under my belt for this month. So that is it. That is all I have to share right now. I would love to know, have you read any of these books? What were your thoughts? And do you have any of those suggestions based on what I've read that you think I might like? I hope you had a great reading week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.